become full professor, director of the Lehigh Environmental Studies Center, and dean of the College of Engineering and Applied Science. I have a little aside, which I think may be the most important piece of information from Harvey's tenure at Lehigh, for a Cornell audience, is that he was, for 2 years, the coach of the junior varsity hockey team. He says he hasn't been back often, and I hope that means that he didn't have to bring his team to be receive that barbaric treatment that visitors get at Lehigh Rink. In 2006, Harvey moved to the University of Buffalo as professor of chemical engineering and dean, again, of the School of Engineering and Applied Science. He was briefly interim provost before, in 2012, moving to his current position as president of Binghamton University. Through these years since leaving Olin Hall, Harvey has pursued excellence in all of his endeavors. In research, Harvey has applied fundamental principles of chemical engineering, catalysis, reaction engineering, process optimization, to critical challenges in energy and environmental science. Of particular note are his highly cited works on hydrogen production, fuel cells, and catalysis for pollution control. For his work as an instructor, Lehigh honored Harvey 3 times as the Engineering College Teacher of the Year, once as the University Teacher of the Year, and once as the University Graduate Advisor of the Year. Quite a record. In his leadership roles, Harvey has also been very effective. Notably, in his 4 years as president of Binghamton, he has overseen dramatic growth in both their faculty and their finances, and a vigorous restructuring of their administrative process. The positive outcomes of these efforts have been recognized nationally, with Binghamton now ranking as the top campus in the competitive SUNY system. Finally, I note that throughout his career, Harvey has championed inclusiveness and diversity, a critical, timely concern for us all. His efforts on this front have been recognized with the National Society of Black Engineers Faculty Award at Lehigh, and a Buffalo Engineering Awareness for Minority Service Award. Harvey, I can say with confidence that Ray would be proud. We are proud. Thank you for making the time to join us here today. So, please join me in welcoming President Harvey Stenger to present the 2016 Thorpe Lecture entitled Higher Education from the Perspective of a Chemical Engineer and a University President.
That was a great introduction. I can just go home now. I was on recording that, right? I want to show my mother. And all that money that they spent sending me to college was worth it. And that's probably what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is costs of higher education and where we might be going. So the title of the talk is, or it could be, is College a PFR or CSTR? We're not really sure. We'll get to that at the end. So first, Abe already did this, my path. How did I get here today? And he outlined these things, and they're kind of up there. But really, it was my love of reactor engineering that was built by a group of faculty here, and also the concern of our nation's energy supply. And Professor Harriet, Professor Schuler, who are here today, were probably the 2 people who directed me for that future. Certainly, Professor Thorpe was number 1. I'll tell a couple of Professor Thorpe stories. Professor Merrill, Finn, Sheely, Smith, Cohen, Rodriguez, Street, and Susan Daniel, who wasn't here, but she was a student at Binghamton University, at Lehigh University, when I was at Lehigh University, so I connected to her. And Jeff Tester, who was actually a professor at MIT when I was a graduate student, and now he's a professor here. So the connections that I still have with Cornell are important. And Satterfield and Way and Georgiakis at MIT were kind of the role models that I had there as well. Lehigh, as Abe said, 84 to 06. The story that I don't tell sometimes, because how I became the dean of engineering. I was 36 years old, and I was the associate dean, and the dean had a heart attack and died. And the provost came to me the next day and said, we're going to start a search. Maybe you could be the dean for a couple of months while we do a hurry-up search. And I did that, and then at the end of those couple of months, they started a search. I became a candidate and became the dean, which I thought was fun because all the department chairs were older than my father at the time. At University of Buffalo, actually I took some time off from administration while I was at Lehigh, went back to the faculty for about 6 or 7 years, watched my daughters grow up, go to college, and then restarted my administrative path, my leadership path, and went to the University of Buffalo, where again, a provost hires me as dean, he becomes president and hires me as the interim provost. And that job then led me to becoming the president of Binghamton University, which a lot of people don't know too much about. A relatively young engineering program, no chemical engineering program there. Mechanical, electrical, computer science, industrial engineering, and biomedical engineering, where I've been president for 4 years. So we've got about 17,300 students there right now. So I made these slides myself. There is no animation except for this slide, I promise. Okay. So freshman year, I'm in Engineering 105, I think they still call it, and you have to go around and meet departments and get your something signed. You actually met with the department so you could pick your major in your sophomore year. And I remember coming into a room in Olin Hall and saying to somebody, and it turned out to be Professor Thorpe, I really want to work on the environment. I'm concerned about the future's energy. I think I should probably be an environmental engineer or maybe a civil engineer. And I remember him looking at me going, you don't want to be a civil engineer. They don't make any money. You should be a chemical engineer. That was it. I became a chemical engineer. Material and energy balances. He was my first professor in chemical engineering. He was tough. He was looking for survivors. And I remember, I don't think it was this room, I think it was upstairs. I remember him coming in, and I will even tell you if you need a shower, because you stink today. He would just have this angry appearance. We couldn't tell whether it meant that we really smelled or that we were just poor students.
You don't say that anymore.
But he said, when we finally got to separations, which he taught probably second semester junior year, we had made it. We were the cool kids then. We could hang, now he was Uncle Ray. And we could hang with Uncle Ray, and we could chat with Uncle Ray. And we would go into class, and before, Christy's here as my witness, Christy Gilmartin at that time, Christy Waters now was a classmate of mine in 1979, we would come in and we would chant, story, 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 story. And before he could lecture, he would have to tell us a story. The stories usually revolved around World War II and his career in the Navy. Shooting down planes was one of his favorite stories. Talk about these Japanese jets and Japanese planes that would fly so low behind the ship that he was on that they couldn't detect them with their radar because they were below the wake of the ship. They were so low. So they would, and he was telling us, and he'd draw pictures on the board, they would shoot the rockets into the water in front of the planes, and the planes would then be caught by the wake and the splash that would come up from these bombs. But then he would tell the story of Hedy Lamarr. Anybody know Hedy Lamarr? Okay, so Hedy Lamarr was a famous actress in those days in World War II. Did several movies, very beautiful actor. But Hedy Lamarr was also an innovator. She held several patents in how to transmit information securely during the war. And actually, I can't remember what the reason was that he would tell us these stories, but Christy has reminded me that one day came into class and the students had rigged up behind the screen that would be lowered before the class a poster of Hedy Lamarr on the screen, and as the screen came down, there was Ms. Lamarr for Uncle Ray to see. He was fun to be around with. He was tough, but he was fun to be around with. So my question is, what would he be worried about today? What would Professor Thorpe be worried about today? He was passionate about quality. You had to do things perfectly. I remember asking questions and realizing I should not have opened my mouth. Because the way he would answer it was so methodical that all I had to do was think, and I could have gone from point A to point B. He kept it simple. And that's where you learned how to say, well, you take a big problem and you break it down into little problems, and you solve each one of those problems, and when you're done, you solve the big problem. So keep it simple. Make it the smallest problem you can. So I think today he might look at universities and he might say, you know, I think they're a little too complex. And maybe they're a little bit too expensive. Because I really want to have good chemical engineers in the future. And he might worry that maybe we've created a system that won't be able to create great chemical engineers in the future who will be able to save the environment, produce crops at affordable rates, make sure that our energy needs are satisfied, and that we manufacture and provide great healthcare, science, and supplies. So what do you feel good about where we are? So this is where I start. The cost of college over the past 20 years. Let's just look at 20 years, even though it's been 37 since we graduated. In the past 20 years, the Consumer Price Index has increased 55%. The national universities, there's 300 national universities that U.S. News and World Report tracks. These are the big ones. Their costs have gone up. If you're a private university, went up 179%. Public out-of-state students, so Binghamton, a student from New Jersey, well, maybe not Binghamton, but a normal state university in New York is still pretty affordable. Out-of-state for perhaps a student going from here to Pennsylvania, 226%. Public in-state, 296%. The cost differential, though, because they start with small numbers, here's the average public in-state, average public out-of-state, and the private schools. The cost differential has widened, and that now we have a $28,000 per year, and this is just tuition and fees, not room and board, $28,000 a year difference between the in-state public and the private versus $12,000 in 1995. My Honda Accord is my other example. My Honda Accord that I bought last year, leased last year, cost $30,000, $30,700. And in 1995, a similarly equipped Honda Accord was $21,550, and that was a price increase of 43%. Gasoline has gone crazy over the last 20 years. It peaked at $3.62, somewhere in the middle of there a few years ago, and now it's down to $2.43. And so you think about these price changes, and you say, okay, I kind of understand gasoline, supply of oil, all those things that get wrapped up into the cost of gasoline. Certainly understand a car getting more expensive, but actually it's probably more valuable now. All the gadgets and widgets and safety features of an Accord today are far exceed a 1995 Accord, but its price has actually gone up less than the Consumer Price Index. What the heck's happening to higher education? I mean, what is driving a 296% or 179% increase over 20 years? Does that make sense? Does anybody even care about this? Your parents probably care about it. So here's one of the reasons. Here's the first primary reason. It's a demand thing. Total enrollment increase in 1995 in colleges and universities. All colleges, universities, all people there, not just the traditional four-year colleges or community colleges. 14.3 million in 1995, 20.3 million in 2015. There was actually a peak in 2010 of 21 million, 2010. First-time freshmen, first-time full-time students, those are our traditional freshmen, 1.6 million in 1995, 1.96 million in 2015. You almost say, there's got to be something wrong with those numbers, right? Shouldn't I be able to multiply those by 4 and get the number up there? No, not true, because you have a lot of people, in fact 30% of college students now are over the age of 25. They're returning students, plus you have a greater enrollment in graduate schools, so you have the master's students, the PhD students, all of the different applied fields in the master's field. So yeah, it is true, 20 million and about 2 million freshmen. But there's been a slight decrease since 2011. And that probably is going to be something we're going to have to be watching very carefully, because certainly you know as demand increases, then the price can be adjusted for a fixed supply. And we really do, in a lot of universities, have a fixed number of seats in their freshman class. Oh, and if you look at the percentage of students going to college and high school, it hasn't changed much. It's about 60 to 65% every year for the last 20 years. And you can also see here a slight decrease in the number of high school graduates. This is the high school graduate number here in the United States, slightly declining. Part 2 of the demand issue is the demand for graduates and their career educational requirements. Graph over here, 2015, bachelor's degree difference, the bachelor's degree student, the median usual weekly earnings. So this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. If you have a bachelor's degree, your average weekly earning is $1,137, about $53,000 a year. That's all bachelor's degrees in all ages, in all fields. High school diploma, $678. Certainly, there's a big advantage of having that degree. People know that. Universities know that. Unemployment rates also pretty bad for high school compared to college. Bachelor's degree, 2.8% unemployment. High school, 5.4% employment. You got to have this degree in order to advance in terms of the salaries that you want to get, as well as having the job opportunities. And then this spread between the bachelor's degree and the high school degree is shown in this graph here. The high school degree in the lower curve here. This is two-year college students here, and this is the bachelor's degree up here. So you can see the difference of that $28,000 to $45,000 today between a bachelor's degree annual salary. Again, averaged over, that's in 2013, they're kind of labeling these millennials and Gen Xers. But you can see that it's gotten a little bit bigger than it was here, but it was growing significantly for quite a while. The spread between a high school degree and a bachelor's degree was growing significantly. It wasn't that different back in 1965. And so the need for that education, again, started to get more and more important until about 1995. And then it started to kind of flatten out. Universities are in a great market. Wow. We've got a growing demand of students going to college every year. We have a growing demand for employers to hire college graduates every year. We have growing salaries for college graduates. Notice this one. The average distance between home and college, 91 miles. 91 miles. So you would think it's a free market. They can go anywhere they want. It's not really something that perhaps should be regulated. But 91 miles does say that students are sort of in a catchment area and that they will tend to go to the universities closest to them. There's little regulatory control over pricing. Other than the state of New York, public university tuitions are mandated and adjusted by the Board of Trustees of their system. California, Florida, Texas, Board of Trustees determines their tuition rates. Their board is appointed by the legislature, so there is some control over them. State University of New York, tuition is set by the legislature. So you can't just have some rogue Board of Trustees changing the tuition policies in New York. But private universities have no real controls. They can charge whatever they want every year. And the last one, a lot of peer pressure to go to college, a lot of peer pressure to go to big name school. That really important university name is so vital to your, perhaps perceived for your future. And the parent desires. What a market. This is like the iPhone. Everybody wants to have it, you gotta have it, and people are lining up to get it. But there's a little trouble brewing right now. So today in Princeton, the town of Princeton is suing Princeton University, saying they're not a not-for-profit, and that we'd like them to pay property taxes. Yale has been fighting this for years, and they've been bribing the city of New Haven with a payment in lieu of taxes, a few $1 million a year to pay for a fire department and street cleaning and all those kinds of things. So there might be perhaps a question over whether or not higher education is not-for-profit and therefore tax exempt. Well, wait a minute. I've heard about this thing that the sticker price isn't the same as the real price. Right? You got to tell me that maybe all those inflated numbers aren't real. Maybe there's some number underneath that inflated price that is really what the students are paying. And that's true. So let's take a look at what has been happening to college tuition pricing. Tuition fees, room and board, kind of all in, TFRB the average cost per year sticker price. Public university per year, $19,500. Private university, $43,920. Boy, don't you wish Cornell was $43,920. It's more like $60,000 right now for room, board, tuition fees. But the real price, and again, this is a huge sample, thousands of universities being sampled here. The real price is $14,000 for public, $26,000. $26,000 for privates. Very few people pay the sticker price. Who determines the price? Well, the federal government. Doesn't the state government, the federal government help out those people who are poor to give them some tuition? So they're going to help with the price. They're going to be able to help reduce it. The federal methodology, the FAFSA form, you fill that out. Students fill that out, and they find out whether or not their family contribution is lower than what the cost of attendance is. And if it is, the federal government will give that student a Pell Grant. The maximum Pell Grant for a year is $5,100. It's flat for several years. New York State has a tuition assistance program. So again, if you fill out the FAFSA form and your family contribution, same form, comes out that your family can't contribute enough to pay for that university, and the university accepts you, New York State will give you $5,100 as well. After that, it's all loans. Those are the only public assistance grants that you're going to be eligible for, and that's $10,000. Public university, that almost gets you there. Private university, certainly short. Interesting that you would say, well, there's this huge endowments that universities have, right? Billions of dollars in endowment. Doesn't that cover all those scholarships? Isn't that how we help students go to college? Well, turns out that NACUBO, which is the college administrative CFOs, a third, they say nearly, but a third of total undergraduate institutional aid came from endowment. 1/3. So if you're getting 10 from the federal government and a third from here, there's still some missing pieces to get you the total amount of money to go to the university. And that's what is done mostly by universities now, is they discount. That's the sticker price. Here's the price that I'm going to offer you. Kind of like a car. You come in, there's a sticker price. We know that they're not going to charge us the sticker price. I went to Consumer Reports. I looked up what the real price is going to be. I'm going to negotiate with this guy. It's kind of what we're doing right now. Why do they discount? Because they want the best students and the most revenue. So they do statistical modeling. There's several companies out there that will come into a university, look at your applicant pool, analyze their history, their background, their interest in your university. They'll look at their SAT scores, they'll look at their family income, and they'll say, make this student a $5,000 scholarship offer. Make this student an $8,000 scholarship offer. And they will determine what is the best scholarship to give to a student to increase the potential that that student will accept your work. That's yield enhancement, because universities are judged based on how many of the students that they accept come to the university. So if you have 30,000 applicants and you accept 10,000 of them, that would be the selectivity. The yield then would be how, this is chemical engineering, the yield then would be how many of those 10,000 students that you admitted actually came. And so that ratio gives you the selectivity. Turns out the discount rate has been pretty flat since '09. I'm sorry, the discount rate has been increasing since '08-09, since the Great Recession, and the university revenues are flat. Oh, back on endowment. There we are, right there, $6 billion. If you look at how endowments are managed, and many, many endowments are managed in the same way, they have to follow certain standards, that typically you spend about 4% of the principal each year. You don't spend all the earnings, because if in a bad stock market year, you can't spend all the earnings. But you spend about 4% a year. If you took 4% of $1 billion, and you paid $60,000 per year, you'd support about 700 students. So that's why the endowments aren't big enough to supply all that scholarship need that we need. And of course, we know that endowments support faculty, endowed professorships, and they support the facilities operations, and they support the athletic program. So there's a lot of money. And that's where this shortfall that NACUBO talked about, that only 1/3 of the institutional aid comes from endowments. So it's really not coming from what we would hope it had come from, which is the generosity of our alums, which I forgot to mention, congratulations on the generosity of your alum, Robert Frederick Smith, who will now be, is it on this? Which is outstanding, really. You should be proud to have an alum like that who thinks so highly of Cornell. Is Tony still here? Yeah. So I went online last night, Tony, I said, boy, I better make my annual gift tonight. So I'm going to see Tony tomorrow. And I made sure there was a 5 in there. Somewhere. But $50 million, that's outstanding. So here's the discount rate as a function of years. 38% back in 2004, up to 48%, and rising, and that's the first-time freshmen and all undergraduates. So we're discounting more heavily our freshmen than the past students that have already been here, and that's because you're trying to catch them. You're trying to get them to come. You're reducing the price in order to get those best students to come. Another graph that kind of shows this trend and something that's been happening in the last few years between the net price and the the published price. Let's take the public universities first. There's probably a big sticker around here somewhere. The published tuition and fees, room and board, TFRB, in the top graph, and the discounted one is the lower one. And the published tuition and fees, and this is for in-state students, and this is for out-of-state students for public universities. You only have one set of graphs over here. You have, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. These are the tuition and fees. These include the room and board. But you can see in the private universities, what's happened is since the recession, this actual price, the net price, has been flat. Even though the price has gone up every year, 3 or 4%, the net price has been flat. So that for the last almost 10 years, private universities have had no increases in revenue, even though the tuition rate has gone up every year, because they've had to discount to get their freshmen in. It's not a good thing, because people like to have raises, and costs increase, and if you can't have an increase in your tuition, then you're going to have to go around and start cutting staff, reducing whatever you can reduce. And we're in a tough situation where faculty are tenured. Some universities have unions. It's very difficult to downsize. And then kind of one more verification that this is happening, talking about that for small institutions, the net tuition revenue per freshman has only increased 0.6% last year, showing that it's quite flat. Whereas universities, larger universities, research universities, they grew by about 3.2%, the net revenues. Universities have to manage these net revenues on top of all the other things that they're trying to manage in terms of quality. Supply. Again, I'll bring back that graph. High school students that are graduating and how many are going to college. Turns out that we're going to be in a region of decline in the Northeast by about 1%. Number of public high school graduates is projected to be less than 1%, about 1% lower in 2011-12 than they are in 2009. 4% decrease in the Midwest, growth in the South, and growth in the West. So we're going to see a lower demand, fewer students applying to the colleges and universities 91 miles from their home in the Northeast, so that the universities are going to have to reach for a smaller pool of students to get their income and revenue necessary to run their operations. So it's kind of a bit of a storm. Sticker prices are rising at a rate that seems out of control. They're certainly grabbing a lot of people's attentions, including the presidential candidates and the presidential debates this year. High school graduates, in some reasons, are declining. College attendees from high school, flat. College degree becoming even more important for future income. Federal and state aid flat. Federal and state legislation on pricing is looming, even on private universities. University prices may make them subject to property tax. So we're kind of in this period of time for the next probably 5 or 10 years where we may see some public policies that say not only to the public universities but to the private universities, I'm going to control your price. Just like they control the cost of electricity, cost of water, the cost of natural gas, You're a public utility. Even though there's a private company, NYSEG, or whoever delivers your electricity, the government controls the price. We may be heading in that direction. I'm going to do a case study. I'm going to compare two universities that I know pretty well, Binghamton University and Lehigh University. So Lehigh for 23 years and been at Binghamton for 5. They are so different. They are so different. Lehigh, founded in, I think it was 1865, somewhere back then, about the same time as Cornell was founded. Binghamton University, 1946, started as a branch campus of Syracuse University for returning GIs from World War II, and then became part of the SUNY system in the 60s. Freshman class, Binghamton University, 2,500 students. Lehigh University, 1,200 students. Average SAT at Binghamton, a little over 1,300 in the freshman class, about 1,380 at Lehigh University. When I look at that, I say, boy, I wish I only had to have 1,200 freshmen. I'd have a better SAT score, but that's a public university. The mission is to educate, not just to keep your numbers up. But we did have 28,000 applications, and we admitted 12,000 students. That was in 2014, not 2016. And Lehigh, slightly lower number of applications. There's some self-selectivity. If you think you're going to be an engineer, you might want to go to Lehigh University. If not, you may not want to apply there. It's also more expensive. The endowment, decimal points are missing here. Binghamton University's endowment's $110 million. We were allowed to raise money from private sources starting in the 1970s. Before that, we weren't allowed to raise money. Certainly Lehigh, every dollar back in 1865 is probably worth a lot right now, so they've got $1.2 billion in endowment. First year retention rate, 91% for Binghamton, Lehigh 95%. 6-year graduation rates, 81% for Binghamton, 87% for Lehigh. You think, okay, Lehigh's a little bit better. Now I can see it in the numbers. Lehigh seems to be a better university because of these numbers. How much is it worth? Well, let's look at the rankings. So U.S. News and World Report ranks those 300 national universities. Binghamton University sits at 86. Lehigh number 44. This is the only slide that has Cornell anywhere on it. Warning you. Cornell is number 15 in the country. Nice to be in the top 10. Keep working hard. Get there. If you ever peruse through the U.S. News and World Report rankings, the top 20 universities are all private. So University of Virginia, University of California, Berkeley, Michigan, they don't make the top 20. That seems kind of odd. They're probably pretty good, aren't they? Well, it's the way the data is collected, and the data itself emphasizes and encourages smallness on one hand, and also rewards larger prices as well. There's some problems inside the U.S. News and World Report ranking that concerns me, that it kind of encourages higher prices. This is tough to read, but if you go, so what did the government do? President Obama in 2013 created an Accountability Act and decided that he was going to make a lot more data available on all universities. And he wanted to show the world whether it was worth it to go to certain universities or not. Got in a lot of trouble for that, but he made a huge amount of data available. And from that data, there's a new website called the collegescorecard.ed.gov. It's a federal site. And you can go in and type in your favorite university, and it will show you from historical trends what their price is depending upon the family income. So here's Binghamton University. You can't read it, sorry about that. If you're below $30,000 a year, you pay $10,000. And this is room, board, and tuition. All numbers in. If you're $100,000 or more, you pay $22,000, which is the sticker price at Binghamton. If you're at Lehigh University and you're poor, below $30,000, you would pay about, that looks like about $18,000. But if you're over $100,000, you pay $42,000. Sticker price actually is wrong in this graph. The sticker price at Lehigh is $63,000. So you can determine now with the federal government, this is kind of the Consumer Reports of higher education, you can determine what you should be paying where you go. It's not a negotiation anymore. It's much more of an upfront. And you can try to negotiate, But most universities will know that this information is available, and they'll pretty much stick with that price. How much revenue do they have to spend? Okay, when you put all this stuff aside, they try to figure out how much money am I spending per student versus how much money is Lehigh spending per student. You can do that pretty simply. You take the average net price that is published, you multiply it by the number of students. And then for my case, I'm going to add in all the money that I get from the state. So I get a state appropriation, I get some capital money, and I get some employee benefits because our faculty and staff are state employees. I'm going to add all those in, and I spend $347 million a year spent on my students. Lehigh University spends about 206, but they're much smaller. 5,800 undergraduates, 13,500 undergraduates. At Binghamton University, we spend about $25,000 a year on a student. That takes care of them everywhere. I mean, helps them with their meals, the room and board, their student life activities, tuition, fees, all in. And Lehigh spends $15,000 more on that student. Again, is it worth it? Take a look more at the student population at the two universities. Again, you're kind of reflecting the access issues around public universities. Binghamton University has 29% of its students that are below that $30,000 a year income, family income, and so they're eligible for Pell Grants, 15% at Lehigh. This is what I thought was amazing. Students graduating from Lehigh, only 54% of them have any debt. The students have debt. And the average debt of those students, and they're factoring in the zeros for the students who don't have debt, $34,000. So some have more, some have less, but on average, when a student graduates from Lehigh, if they had debt, it's going to be in that $35,000 range versus $25,000 for a Binghamton University student. Not much difference. You would have expected a larger difference, I think, between the two at graduation. But what happens is that students can only borrow a certain amount of money. I mean, there's a limit to the federal loan program. Even the federal loan programs that aren't subsidized, there's a certain limit. So how did the students get out of there paying and just having $34,000 worth of debt? Mom and dad. Mom and dad took a second mortgage on the house. Mom and dad had been saving in a 529 account. Mom and dad had enough money to pay it as they went. And it turns out that the parents with PLUS loans, and these are the loans that parents can apply for college, is about the same. PLUS loans aren't that good. Interest rates are kind of high. You can actually do better with a second mortgage on your house, and you can get it over a longer period of time. So most parents who have a home and have equity in their home will do that before they'll borrow from the federal PLUS loan program. I want to make a short commercial on the concept of college debt, because I think it's overplayed a little bit. The loan industry, the education loans, the higher education college loans right now, they're outstanding. They're sitting out there waiting to be paid back by students is $1.3 trillion. The debt on all the cars that are being financed right now is $1.1 trillion. Credit cards, $0.7 trillion, and mortgages, $8.4 trillion. I really think that I'm not worried about debt, especially when I know that it's $30,000 to $40,000 per student from these two universities. I also think that when you look at a car versus an education, probably I think the education might have a little more value than the car in the rest of your life, lasts for the rest of your life. So I'm not too worried about this. I don't get it's a crisis concern. And in fact, I think it's manageable, a manageable number right now. And I think that that's something that people aren't really willing to talk about, because it's more exciting to say that there's a debt crisis for our students right now. But they have made these loans a little complicated. You can't go bankruptcy. You can go bankruptcy if you have a bad mortgage. You can go bankruptcy if you can't pay your auto loans. You can go bankrupt if you can't pay your credit cards. You can't declare bankruptcy if you can't pay your student loan. They will put you into a payment plan. They will find a way to get that money from you. Interest is not deductible, which I think is really odd. I mean, think about it. You're investing in your future. You're like a company building a new facility or a new plant. You're investing in the future of that company. That interest on those loans that you would be investing is deductible. But for some reason, it's not for college education. That's kind of weird. But there is this concept, if you have heard about it, income-based repayment plans. Chemical engineers don't have to worry about this. because you make enough money after you graduate that you don't have to worry that you're not making enough money to pay off your loans. And the deal is that whatever you make after you graduate, they'll take 10% of the total before taxes, maybe it's after taxes. 10% of that is all you have to pay. And that could be, let's say you're making $15,000 a year after you graduate, after taxes maybe $13,000. You only have to pay $1,300 a year in your loan, no matter how big the loan is. It could be $70,000, and you're only going to pay a small amount towards that loan. And if you work in a not-for-profit for 10 or more years, you get the loan forgiven after those 10 years. So there are some protections out there for the students who are in financial, who are borrowing money to go to college. Again, a reason to say, I think they've got this sort of figured out. So then back to this college scorecard thing. It was actually announced at Binghamton in 2013. We had our, boy, don't we wish he could be president for 12 years or 16 years sometimes, I don't know. We're going to miss him, but he came to Binghamton to announce the college scorecard launch and the ability for people to learn more about the cost of higher education. You can now go to the college scorecard website. You can type in a university name. You can add names to that. You can filter them. And you get reports that look something like this. It's kind of small. This is, these are all universities, public and private, in Pennsylvania and New York. The list goes on and on and on. And I asked them to sort them on the percent earning above a high school salary. United States Merchant Marine Academy comes in at #1 with, gosh, I can't even read that, $82,000. $82,000. The graduation rate is in purple. That's 73%. And the average annual cost is here on the left. And that's a relatively small number for the Merchant Marines, about $5,000. So if you want to live on a ship your whole life, go to the Merchant Marine Academy, and you will have a very low cost. You'll make the most amount of money of any college graduate in Pennsylvania or in New York. You'll graduate at a fairly high rate, but you'll live on a ship for a long time. Then you have some of the other ones: RPI, Pennsylvania, Villanova, Lehigh, Bucknell, Clarkson, Carnegie Mellon. What do you notice that's similar in all these? Big engineering schools, right? You got RPI, almost all engineering. Lehigh, almost all engineering. Clarkson, Carnegie Mellon, all engineering. And that's why I sort it by high salary, because that's where you're going to see the highest salaries, are places that have the largest number of students graduating with engineering. So we'll take a look at Lehigh and Binghamton. Lehigh's average cost, $18,000. Again, all these sources are slightly different, so the numbers are sometimes can be different. $18,000, Lehigh $31,000, 81%, 87%. Salary after attending, $76,000 for Lehigh, 10 years out. $57,000 for Binghamton. There's a difference. So there must be something in here that I could use in order to make a rational decision of how to pick which college I should go to based upon this information. So guess what? A whole bunch of people have been doing it. So you can go to Bloomberg, Payscale.com, The Street, BestColleges.com, Fortune, Salary.com, Huffington Post. There's something called Investopedia out there, and you can sort all the universities on their return on investment, which is a standard calculation with data that is extremely faulty. In the federal government information, the only salaries they have are students who filled out a FAFSA form. And in Payscale, the only data they have is from students, alumni who filled out surveys. They don't tell you this. It's kind of buried down in there. But they have some real hard rankings that they're going to push out there to say who is the best school, who has the best return on investment. Whereas you might be missing 50% of the students who didn't fill out a FAFSA because they're from wealthy families. They're not even included in these calculations. And if the respondent rate to Payscale.com isn't very good, you certainly aren't going to have very good data. But people are selling magazines with these rankings. Forbes has one, and they kind of rank some stuff together. They don't do a return on investment. They include things like cost, future earnings, graduation rates. This is the only one I like because it puts Binghamton ahead of Lehigh. Lehigh 55th and Binghamton 15th. And that's all public and privates in there. So this is the one I carry around in my briefcase to show to our alums. Here's Payscale. Really slick websites too. When websites work really good, you believe the data more than if the websites don't work. Right? So you can click on these things without financial aid, say, oh, the numbers behind this must be awesome. And Lehigh 25th, Binghamton 77th. Of course, I don't like this one. Very good. But they do this, and look at the return on investment. 20-year net ROI. And we know it's not even close. Probably has nothing to do with reality. But students are looking at that and trying to decide, is this something that I should factor in my decision? So you come down to having daughters, sons who are going to go to college. Where do you go? What do you consider? Is cost really going to be important? It's complicated. Student quality. How good are the students? What's their graduation rate? I don't want my student coming home after 2 years. I want them graduating. What's this best value thing? How big is the university? Do I want a small university or a big university? What's its reputation? What's its prestige? And I'll tell you a story about Jason. Jason emailed me last week. Jason is a brand new student at Binghamton. He says, can I go to lunch with you? I said, sure, I'm available Wednesday. So we went to lunch Wednesday. And I said, Jason, tell me your story. Jason went to Raritan Community College in New Jersey. Tells me his dad and his mom are really good. They love him, but they're really tough on him, and they've told him that they're not spending a dime more on college than they can afford, or that they want to pay. Mom and dad make lots of money, do not qualify for any financial aid. We went to community college for 2 years, got accepted at Lafayette, expensive, Binghamton, cheap. Dad said, you are going to Binghamton, you are not going to Lafayette. Jason's having a great time, and he's enjoying it. He's only been there a couple months. Midterms are next week. I'll check back in with Jason after that. But those are the kinds of decisions that parents are now getting involved in. It's not just the student coming back and saying, I really want to go to Lafayette. Great, go. Not anymore. This concept of cost is going to be talked about around the table. Back to the cost of college. This is the same slide I had before. What should colleges be doing? I think the supply-demand has been inelastic. Price really hasn't affected demand. You got to go to college. More people are going to college. Make the price anything you want. It's like being on a deserted island selling food. You've got to come to you. But we may be hitting the limit. It may be at the point where it starts to become more or less. So I think we're going to have to adjust our business model. Cornell, Princeton, Yale, they're going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen. If I'm Clarkson, if I'm RPI, if I'm some of the other private universities that are more expensive, I might have a problem. I might be running into this elasticity that's going to start affecting my demand. And maybe I won't be able to fill my freshman class no matter how much I discount it. Or perhaps I don't discount it enough in 1 year, and all of a sudden I find out my freshman class is 100 or 200 students short, and I'm $1 million short in my salary budget that year, and I can't pay my faculty and staff. But it's like the Honda. How'd the Honda do? How did the Honda become almost cheaper and better after 20 years, and colleges got so much more expensive? A good engineer should question that. So here's some cost control ideas. And I know we've only got a few minutes left. Faculty time, administration, student life, advising, experiential learning, pedigree versus degree. Technology. The faculty balance. So critical to make sure that faculty spend their time on the important things. We've got to get them the support that they need to do things more efficiently, and we find out that faculty are doing things that probably aren't the right things that faculty should do. And this 40-40-20 teaching research service ratio is something that we should focus on. It's healthy for the faculty. It also helps us attract really good faculty. You have to make tenure and promotion incentives very high in order for faculty to maintain that balance. We worry about post-tenure lack of productivity, so perhaps we need a system in place that actually tracks post-tenure productivity, and that perhaps there's another step or 2 steps after that that maintains that tenure. Maybe tenure isn't forever. And some universities have unionized faculty, so we're going to have to worry about how we navigate that if we're going to move in that direction. Administration spending is increasing at the CPI, and that doesn't make sense. We should be increasing the efficiencies of administration. We should be distributing the staff duties to more technology and to our students. We really don't perhaps need the staffing that we have in universities. Student life costs. Are they all really necessary? Well, it's kind of like if they have it, I've got to have it. If they've got good athletics, I've got to have good athletics. If they have good recreation, I have to have good recreation clubs. Mental health counseling. One of the fastest growing costs on campuses these days are the counselors needed for students who are coming with mental health concerns. Career guidance. Got to get them a job. Got to work even harder to get them a job, because that's what we're trying to sell them sometimes. Campus safety and even dining. Are all these costs really necessary? They become extraordinarily important in the competition for these new freshmen. Advising. This is an idea that I think will happen sooner or later. I don't think we need advisors. I think we need an avatar with artificial intelligence. You can just ask a question. I want to get this degree. What do I need to take and when do I take it? Seconds, it's going to tell you exactly what you need, rather than sitting there reading through a catalog and trying to find that out with a live person. Experiential learning, co-op programs. They're great. The 5-year programs, RIT, Northeastern, Cincinnati, Drexel, you spread costs over 5 years, and you get to have some income offsets in that year that they're working, or the 4 semesters that they're working. Certainly they're going to be better prepared for their job. It's hard to start, though. I started one at Lehigh. I modeled it after the Cornell co-op program. It's a 4-year program with just 2 work blocks. It's hard to get them into the 5-year model like Drexel and Northeastern has, but it really can reduce costs and help the students work their way through college. The pedigree versus the degree. How important is the name of the school? If it costs less, it must not be as good. That's the first assumption that students and parents make, right? If it's cheap, it's got to be cheap. The alumni network. Shouldn't I be buying into this alumni network that's going to help me get my job afterwards? Well, you're probably going to get your job because you're smart. If a student does choose a lower cost school, what do they ask for from mom and dad? They want a car, study abroad, and they want someone to help them with graduate school. That's probably pretty important. And maybe that pedigree isn't as important to some families, like Jason, and maybe these things might be more important to them. Parent guilt, probably one of the highest ones. I worked really hard my whole life. I wasn't home a lot to take care of my kids and take them to soccer games. Wherever they want to go, I'm going to pay for it. Don't worry, I'll take good care of them. It happens a lot, kind of the parent guilt feeling. The role of technology, back to that automobile. The Honda Accord is much better today than it was in 1995. The costs will increase. How can we do that? But we've actually gotten more expensive when you think of technology. Research is much more expensive now than it used to be. Those big tools that we've got to buy, the expensive equipment that we've got to have, the faculty are a lot more expensive that they're really good at research. So actually, the role of technology and research has increased our costs from the research perspective. And can we use technology to teach students? Well, jury's still out on that. I think we're still working. However, I do think that there are some things that are happening that can help us. I'm not so sold on online or even the semi-live professor. Semi-live professor means that they talk to their computer and record it, and then it's put on the internet, and you get to watch it later on that day or 2 days later, whenever you want to. It's really not Professor Thorpe. It really isn't, where he can kind of look at you, lean over you, whack you in the back of the head. Oh, we can't do that anymore. Smell you. Computer-based instruction, where it's totally online, there's not even a person involved in it. It's probably good as a supplement. I'm more of a proponent of the hybrid models, where we're flipping the classroom, we're pre-recording the lectures, letting students come into class and work on problems. Engineers do this really well. How do we get that in all the other disciplines? The big gains, I think, are in student advising, again, back to that avatar and artificial intelligence, and course management. Probably use Blackboard here, and you probably need it, right? It goes down. It doesn't have everything that you need. It's really hard to learn and how to use. Why is there only one product for course management? There's a couple others out there. Blackboard seems to be the one that everybody is using. And I think there could be huge improvements in getting faculty to use their time more wisely. So it's a balance. First impression, sense of belonging, tour guide, campus visit, reputation, athletics, school spirit, alumni network, high school counselor, high school classmates, peers that you will be with, extracurricular programs, pedigree, location, town, environment, aesthetics, faculty quality, reputation, innovation, technology, weather, gender balance, commitment to the environment, campus services, dining. That's where I want to go to school, Mom, Dad. That's where I want to go to school. Just forget this. When will that balance change is the question. And that's kind of the question today. I don't have an answer. I think it's going to change over the next couple of years. I think it's going to change significantly. And I just thought I'd put up some fun things at the end to end my talk. What makes my job challenging as a university president? Politics of higher education. This whole concept around costs, funding, the tuition rates, the indictments. Read the newspaper. There's so many professors right now being indicted for fraud and for bid reading. Student activism. What's next? What is the next protest that we will have? I'm not sure. I hope this election ends quickly. Growing pains. We've been growing at Binghamton. We're up about 2,500 students in the last 5 years. Classrooms. Do we have enough seats? Parking. Everybody wants to talk about parking. I tell them, go to Cornell and see if you can find a parking space. And as Binghamton started just a recently short period of time ago, and we were mostly an undergraduate program, adding research space has been one of our toughest things. Faculty retention, probably going to be our #1 issue in the next 5 years or so. They're costly to hire, they're very expensive to lose good faculty. And again, kind of being the State University of New York and Binghamton University, young alumni, building that alumni pride and trying to get our alumni to think that, hey, we're pretty good. And I talk a lot about value and how important value is, and they get that, and I think that they're understanding that. So, in conclusion, we miss Professor Clark. And this had nothing to do with my talk. Thank you. Question?
So we seem to presume that here in the United States that we have a monopoly on deep thought and knowledge about university teaching and education and so forth. Other countries have different models for this stuff and do quite well. I was a postdoc in Germany, and the German students that I worked with were very well educated. That they were trained in a system that had completely different priorities and was, by comparison to us, was really cheap. They didn't have any varsity athletics. They didn't have any clubs and stuff on campus. Largely, they were living in apartments or at home. There was no infrastructure at the university except the stuff that taught them. It was just laboratories and classrooms and teaching the professors, for example, right?
And we're highly expensive. We have athletic programs that are more important, perhaps, than what we do in the classroom. Have we got it wrong, or have we got it right and they're wrong? Well, one is, maybe they're both right. Maybe it fits their economy and their societies, and ours fits ours. When I think about overseas and international, I think more about the developing countries and where they are in their turnaround. We just had an agreement with Jordan, Hashemite University in Jordan, where the majority of their engineering students are taught by students who have bachelor's degrees, not PhD degrees. They're going to start sending 10 of their best undergraduates every year to Binghamton to get PhDs, fully funded at Binghamton, so that they can go back and teach in Jordan. If you're in Jordan, you're probably going to stay in Jordan, and you're probably going to get most of your faculty from Jordan. The next countries are going to be in Africa. Just met with the president of a university in Ethiopia. Same thing. They're teaching their undergraduates with bachelor's degrees. And I think that that's an opportunity for us. So I don't think too much about the European market. It's been there for a long time. It is completely different than us. But if I'm going to think across an ocean, I'm going to think about the developing countries. And
so I'm thinking about what we could learn about controlling our costs by going to a different model.
Well, you pay
like
faculty a lot less.
The Open University in the UK, for example.
Yes, I mean, what's the UK faculty salary these days versus the United States faculty salary? Half?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's less.
Yeah.
Questions out there?
But if you just go back to that question, I mean, if you look at all the revenue streams, and you look at the athletic department, the dining and all, are those all cost neutral? Are those drawing out from the endowment? Are those adding to it? And what places are largely contributing to some of these outrageous costs that you mentioned? So if you look at administration versus athletics, because in some places the athletics department brings in a ton of revenue as well, right? So that may add to the revenue stream, and Cornell maybe it detracts from it. I don't know what it is, depending on how good your team is. But so it may make sense for some universities, and for some, absolutely no sense.
Yeah, and right. Most universities don't make any money in their athletics. They lose money in their athletics. There's about a dozen that actually have a net return to the university, and the rest of them are spending multiple millions of dollars. That's justified by our alumni will give us more money in gifts. So that's the argument they have there. And there's a feeling of student pride, and it helps their applications if they have a great athletic program. So there's some balance there of the costs and the losses there. Dining zeroes out, the costs are balanced. Room balances out, totally zero. The problem is that you have to give raises. You want your faculty and staff to get raises every year, and if your revenue is flat, that's the problem. Right now, we're raising our price every year. Everybody's raising their price 3, 4, 5% every year, and their discount rate is increasing so that they actually aren't capturing any of that, but they still have to give raises. And when they stop giving raises and they realize they will never probably be able to break that trend, that's when they start to go out of business. That's when the faculty start to leave, they go to other universities, and that's when you'll start to see some of these more expensive second-tier universities probably go bankrupt, tough word, probably be absorbed by the local community, perhaps turning into a public university. And I can do it for half the price. I do have a model that can deliver it. I have a 21 to 1 student to faculty ratio. Cornell has a 12 to 1. It can still give you an education, but maybe it's not going to be quite as good. And that's why perhaps the Lehigh kid gets a little bit more on graduation than our students.
Good. Jay.
All right, so first of all, the talk was awesome, thanks. And also the discounting was really informative. I didn't realize that the discount has been going up. But one thing I'm still worried about, despite discounts, is this idea that maybe debt is not as manageable as maybe believed. There's a lot of discount programs, but there's also a high rate of defaulting, and it's going. My impression is that maybe it'll increase over time. I'm not so sure. But I'm kind of wondering, how do you feel about this being more of a, like this, first of all, a lot of us are in debt, like collectively as students, that debt's rather high, the possibility of defaulting is really high. And then also, from a social perspective, it seems like no one else is worried about this but our generation. But when I think about it, it's that we're deferring getting a job, therefore we're not paying Social Security, we're not having children, therefore we won't get Social Security. We also kind of worry about the workforce in general. How are we going to replenish that workforce if all of us are still in college? So and can't find a job when we get out. So how do you feel about just kind of these more long-term effects and how this might not just affect us, but everyone else?
Yeah. I think debt will continue to increase slowly. If it's $34,000 a year total, when you graduate now, it'll grow more. It's the graduate programs that I worry most about. When you think about what an engineer or a management or accounting student makes after they graduate, they're probably going to be okay. They're going to be able to make those payments on that $34,000 loan because they're going to have the same amount of payments on a car for about the same amount. So I think they can handle it. What I worry about is a student who graduates with a philosophy degree, a humanities degree, social science degree, has to get an advanced degree, law school, medical school, social work, public administration, MBA. They have to take out large loans for that. These numbers are undergraduate only numbers. Where the scary numbers are is you go and get that master's of science in something or a master's of something, and that costs you $60,000 or $70,000, and that's totally borrowed money. And I'll tell you, I have daughters who borrowed money for graduate school. It is so easy to borrow money for graduate school. It's click, 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 and boom, $30,000 shows up at your university because you're a good bet, because you've already got an undergraduate degree, so they're willing to loan you that money, knowing that you can't go bankrupt. They'll be able to hold you for the rest of your life. They'll sequester your income. They'll bill it to your taxes. So I think what we have to do is educate our students more about the cost of graduate school and how can you manage your undergraduate programs so that you perhaps can minimize that loan or minimize even that cost and increase. And wouldn't it be great if all students went to college to become engineers? and then we probably wouldn't have it. But it wouldn't. It'd be kind of a boring world. So we need students who have to go through those liberal arts programs, go to law school, go into social work. Talking about my daughters perhaps specifically, because the world needs them, but we're going to have to find ways to help them down the road. And I really do think this income-based repayment plan, as well as the loan forgiveness plan for students working not-for-profits, is something that a lot of people don't know about and they don't take advantage of.
I think we better hold and maybe come up after. Please join me and thank you, President Stenger, for